You're listening to the WBT Podcast with Michael Lodge. Listen to all of our podcasts at www.wbtpod.com. Stay informed. Let's get started.
So we have the two tax bills, one in Congress and one in the Senate. And there is differences between both of the bills. Now, listen. Why in the world do we have two bills? Why does the Senate have to have their bill and the Congress have to have their bill? Why is it that the Congress doesn't create a bill and pass it over to the Senate and then the Senate can mark it up? But no, the Senate has to come out with their own bill, and let me tell you, it's not that great of a bill, okay? So about an hour before the White House, Ways and Means Committee approved that sweeping tax overhaul. Then the Senate Finance Committee unveiled its own plan. And there are big differences between the two plans, okay? So first of all, let's talk about the tax brackets. The House has 12%, 25%, 35%, and 39.6% for the millionaires. The Senate keeps 7 but lowers them all to 10, 12, 22, 25, 32.5, 35, and then 38.5. Why? Come on, let's just get down to the 4 basic ones. Make it simple. The more we simplify this, the better for the American people. So let's then talk about the child tax credit. In the House bill, it increases from $1,000 to $1,600. Okay, the Senate bill increases it just to a flat $1,650 per child. The corporate cut. The House would lower the top corporate tax rate from 35% to 20% next year, and the Senate would do it starting in 2019. Why in 2019? We need these tax cuts to start immediately. So that's absolutely stupid. The Senate bill is I think, is basically worthless at this moment, after I've read you these 3 things. Estate tax. The House would double the current exemption to apply only to estates worth more than $10 million next year, and phase out the tax completely over 6 years. The Senate would double the exemption next year, but otherwise keep the tax. Major medical expenses. Now I'm going to tell you right now that I do not believe there should be any deductions, okay? No deductions that you're going to itemize on. The deduction for expenses that exceed 10% of a taxpayer's income would be eliminated by the House. Okay? The Senate does not change this deduction. So the Congress did the right thing by eliminating it, and the Senate keeps it on. So that means that the medical lobbyists have been in there talking to the Senate and getting their way. Mortgage interest. For new mortgages, only interest on the first $500,000 borrowed for a primary home would be deductible under the House bill, and interest in mortgages for second homes and home equity loans, well, what we call HELOCs, would no longer be deductible. That's good. The House did a good thing. The Senate would not change the current limit, which is the first $1 million borrowed, but would end the deduction for the home equity loans. Worthless. Absolutely worthless. Congress did the right thing. The Senate did the wrong thing. Which means that the lobbyists have more power in the Senate than they do in Congress, it looks like. State and local taxes. The House bill would allow a deduction up to $10,000 in property taxes, but end deductions for income or sales taxes. The Senate would eliminate all of them. Now, the Senate did the right thing on that. Student loan interest deduction eliminated by the House bill, left intact by the Senate. Teacher purchases. Deduction for Teachers who buy supplies for their classrooms would be eliminated by the House. Would be eliminated by the House bill, but left in place by the Senate. So once again, we have that deduction in place in the Senate. So I have this real problem is that the Senate bill seems like they're really not doing much of anything. I don't see it. I mean, having 7 tax rates and keeping the corporate tax rate and not doing any changes until 2019 doesn't do anything for America. It doesn't. So we need these changes immediately, and we cannot have tax reform unless they're done immediately. I mean, that's what the president wants. I don't know what's in the minds of members of the Senate. They seem to have this mentality that they are better than the American people. So they come up with these really dumb measures that really don't do anything for the American people. But they seem to have excuse me, they seem to have kept their ties very close to the lobbyists on several of these issues. Remember what I've always said, the more deductions that you have in your tax returns, the more chances of possibility you have for an IRS audit. We need to get away from that altogether. The tax return should be so simplified that there should be no audits. Because that's what Americans are so afraid of, is getting that letter that says audit. But the Senate keeps putting stuff out there that just really doesn't make any sense. So I'm against the Senate bill and I'm for the congressional bill. But the bill out of Congress needs some work also. It needs a lot of work. But at least we're on a right direction with Congress. I do not know what's up with the Senate, but the Senate just does. McConnell and his cronies there just don't seem to think about the American people. They only are thinking about government. And the whole purpose is to downsize government, downsize the IRS and the rule against us. Downsize government is the goal of tax reform. To put more money back into American people's pockets than more taxes going out. But the Senate sits there and twiddles their thumb and comes up with a really lame-ass tax reform package. So I'm not for the Senate tax reform package right now. I'm leaning towards the one out of Congress, but it still needs work. But the Senate has no idea what tax reform is. They have no idea. If they want to cut down on the deficit, stop spending. Sell off some of these properties that you don't need. Get it back into the cash flow. And then you need to focus on the retirement programs there. They are so outlandish that most Americans don't have anything close to what the government has when it comes to retirement packages. And then you have to look at the salaries. The salaries in the nation's capital ranges about $75,000 a piece. If you look at the American salary, it ranges about $45,000. There's a huge difference between you and I working on the street than those that are in government. But the Senate does not want to even touch that. They don't even want to talk about it. So, listen, Americans, tell your congressman, tell your senator you do not want the Senate plan because it stinks to high heaven at the moment. It does nothing for the American people until 2019. Does nothing for businesses until 2019. That's you and I who operate small businesses. So we have a big problem here that the Senate does not understand what tax reform is. We have 74,000 long reading pages of tax code. And when you sign on your tax return under penalty and perjury Those 74,000 pages go right along with your tax return, and it opens you up to tax audit. I just don't get it. Senate, take your tax bill and shove it. Congress, work on your tax bill. Clean it up. That's all that needs to happen. This is Mike Lodge for the WBT. If you have any questions, send me an email at mlodge@lodge-co.com, and I'll try and help you and talk you through whatever issue that you may have. And all of those today's Veterans Day and Saturday's Veterans Day, to all the veterans, I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I love everything that you have done for this country and for the service that you have performed. Veterans are the heart of this nation. And I want every one of us to say thank you so much on this Veterans Day. Remember, a veteran gave his life for you and me, for our freedoms. And that's why we love our veterans from the bottom of our hearts. Again, this is Mike Lodge, and I will talk with you soon.
This is brought to you by Lodge & Co., a business and tax advisory firm where your success is our goal. Call us today toll-free at 888-681-1518 or visit us at www.lodge-co.com and learn more about what we can do for you. Lodge & Co., your source for sound business and tax services.
Thank you for listening to the WBT with Michael Lodge. Join us again tomorrow as we explore more about business and taxes. Follow us on iHeartRadio and go to our podcast website at www.wbtpod.com and listen to all of our podcasts and read our blogs.
Wow.